If there is one very important thing I want you to take away from this video, it'll be to keep your speed boots. Speed not only gives you indirect energy restoration, because the more times you act means the more you get to charge up your energy recharge. It also has offensive stats in a sense where you are able to dish out more damage in a much quicker fashion. Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and we're back with another tutorial guide video, and today we have a relic guide in terms of what to farm, what is efficient to farm, and my thoughts as well. We can start farming gold tier gear as early as Trailblaze level 30 in terms of like the Planisphere, as well as the Link Rope in the Simulated Universe 5 and World 6 as well. If for those of you who are actually starting to farm, most of us will actually be starting around Trailblaze level 40 and beyond to get stuff like the boot, the gloves, as well as head and body as well. This is not a should you farm guide. I'll be doing that in terms of my efficiency guides that I put on the channel as well. But assuming you've made up your mind, you want to do some farming, this guide is going to be talking about what is the efficient stats to look for, as well as what are some couple of main stats that you really want to go for. Now let's talk first in terms of like the general sense, in terms of main stat. My favorite main stats are really 3 of them, and as we mentioned in the opening clip, is definitely a speed boot like this one here. Speed not only gives you energy restoration, it gives you more damage, it gives you more defensive position by giving your team more skills or ability to heal up or shield your team. But the third most important thing, or really what I find is often missed, is that speed is often used to manipulate turn order of your characters, and boots are the best way to do it. Because the main stat can be easily adjustable, for example if you use a gold tier one like this one here, or if we perhaps just bring it down a little bit to a 11 speed one, we can easily select which characters in our roster want to go first, second or third as well, just by tuning the main stat of the boots. Now this is very easy to do, and you don't even need like super endgame gear. You can do it with green, blue, purple and gold as well. Why does this matter? Is because if you want to, for example, dish out a huge AoE damage, generally you want your more defense breaking characters or attack buffers to go first. Defense break, attack buff the team before your secondary, like your main damage dealer, goes in and immediately wipes out the entire team with a huge amount of damage as well. We call that like cleave teams in a lot of other turn-based games. And the second stat I want to talk about is crit rate. Crit rate is super important, especially in the early game, as a lot of our characters don't have any crit rate across the board unless maybe you're a hunt character or two, and you want to unlock that 50% base crit damage that all characters have, because it's free stats that 0 crit rate will not be actually unlocking. As you can see here, just by a level 10, slapping on a crit rate main stat in terms of the body already gives me about 23, and I expect this to go around 30% once it hits level 15 at max as well. This is extremely solid in the early game, as most characters across the board will like crit rate, and I think it's a really solid piece to have. Supports that do a little bit of damage will like crit rate as well, and I think it's a really important main stat that we should focus on and make sure you keep as well. Third main stat I think is very important, other than like attack percentage and stuff like that for the other gear, will definitely be energy regeneration rate that can be found in the Link Rope. This is super important because when combined together with the first priority like getting speed gear, this compounds on that. As you move faster and you take more actions, you get more energy back as well. Energy restoration rate increase compounds on that increased speed. Putting them together, you will actually notice that a lot of your support characters will have tremendous amounts of energy regen as well. They move fast and they recharge even faster as well. As you can see, even a purple gear like this, I actually keep it locked. I think it's really useful to slap on a support later on as well. So those are like 3 major ones to have. Of course, 2 other honorable mentions in terms of main stat would definitely be like your elemental planar spheres, which in terms of like fire damage boost, quantum damage boost and stuff like that. Very general stuff that can be used across the board as long as it's within the correct elemental branch. And last but not least, I want to give mention to one more, and that will be one of the Link Rope's effect, like break effect. I think break effect is very, very strong. Maybe not the meta right now, as it's all about dealing damage in the early game, but break effect is going to be important later on when we come into the game, where enemies with, for example, if they do have like not weakness broken, maybe they get certain enhanced modes and buffs as well. So in a sense, break effect will be useful later on, especially if the character can scale off somewhat with break effect. No harm keeping 1 or 2, especially if like a crit rate stat and stuff like that. So those are like the 5 main stats that I actually will be looking out for and actually keeping quite an eye on, especially if I can get them on the right side. I think it's tremendous amounts of value. Now that we got that aside, let's talk in terms of what domain do we actually want to farm to get most efficiency of our account. I think there are many good sets in terms of individually, and most of us know it too as well. For example, sets like the Musketeer of Wildby is really strong, and each of them have like their own users in terms of elemental and other users as well, for example like healing, break effect and stuff. But most importantly, I think it's very important to look at both the farmable sets in one domain together to see the overall efficiency of a particular domain. This this way we can actually pit individual domains against each other to get the most value out of our Trailblaze energy as well. And in my opinion, I think a couple stand out, but you can't just look at, for example, the Cavern of Corrosion. We need to go across the board into the simulated universe, and I've already done the work, I've done the research, and in my opinion, I think 3 really stand out to me, and probably I'll rank it as my top 3. The first and the best one I think will be something like this domain here, this simulated universe world 6. You can even start farming this domain at level 30 in terms of Trailblaze level 30. So I think this is super highly efficient. For those of you who are watching right now that you're maybe Trailblaze 30 to 40, this is an excellent one to start on as well. The most important set in my opinion, Inert Salsoto, gives you a very strong amount of crit rate by 8%, which is generally universal across the board. As long as you do damage, you definitely will appreciate this as well. Very, very general, and it gives you, for example, the elemental main stat, and you could even find break effect as well as energy restoration rate in the link rope as well. Very, very solid set. If you can get a good one, make sure you keep onto it. I think this is a real solid good value as well. And the pair set in the domain is also not very bad. Bellerblock of the Architects increase defense by 15%, and when you have a certain amount of hit rate, you also gain extra defense. This is very good amounts of free defensive stats, especially if your character is a little bit squishier and you want them to have a bit more survivability. Early on, we won't have like the perfect stats for everyone, so even getting something like this in terms of a very generic defense stat that most characters can use will be tons of value as well. Especially if you're not rushing for some turn order, for example in the Memory of Chaos, to trying to complete it in a certain time, this defensive stat might help you survive, for example, certain one-shots that otherwise you couldn't have. And of course, this world number 6 is going to be like my top priority. The crit damage one is not that good in the early game because we don't really scale that well in terms of crit damage early on. We are looking mainly for crit rate to get that crit rate stat up a little bit more first. And as we go along and you hit like Trailblaze level 40, I think the second best domain to consider definitely will be like the Fleet of the Ageless domain, and also this other one that it has. Both of them are equally as valuable because the Space Sealing Station gives attack of 12%, very, very generic, very useful, especially early on when you're looking for least amounts of wastage as you can. And once the wearer speed exceeds by 120 or higher, you will get additional attack. You can easily cross this mark with a character like Esta pushing them beyond, or even slapping a gold tier speed boots, which is already 25 attack, and a lot of characters will be passing that 120 mark as well. But what is even more interesting for me is definitely the Fleet of the Ageless, which increases wearer's max HP by 12%, and once your speed exceeds the 120 mark as well, all your allies get 8%. And we've already done like a comparison video already previously that we've done on the channel, and this 8% actually stacks. So if you have 3 support characters all using this set, you actually give like your entire team, for example, 24% attack. You could equip all 4 characters with this set, and they will all be giving 32% attack to everyone as well. Very, very tremendous amounts of value, and I will rate this as like number 2 if you want to spend some time to farm. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the Relic domain in terms of Cavern of Corrosion. Out of all of these domains, I do think that a broad general consensus is if you are looking for a particular elemental DPS, let's say your main is maybe Himiko and stuff like that, you do want to go towards like that particular element domain in order to get the better sets for them as well. And some of them, the 4Ps do stand out, and you might want to use them even if you're not running that particular element. And one that definitely stands out will be the Wasteland of Banditry Desert. When you're attacking debuffed enemies, you actually gain 10% free crit rate, and also an additional 20% against imprisoned enemies. Can be generally useful if you don't have anything better to use and you want to look for a nice crit rate stat, because combined together with the other one, the Inert Salsoto we talked about, it really gives you a very, very nice 18% crit rate just from the set itself, not even mentioning like the gear that you're having, for example the body that you can get up to 30+% crit rate. That's already almost 50% just from the two sets as well as the main stat as well. Pretty solid if you ask me in terms of this combination. But this is not the set that I'll actually recommend, and in my opinion, like in third place, the best domain to farm will be a domain like this one here, the Cavern of Corrosion Path of Providence. And now let me explain why. I think this set, the Guard of Whirring Snow, is a very, very solid general set. Anyone can use damage reduction in the team, and even so, at the beginning of turn, if the wearer's HP is less than 50%, you get some HP restoration as well as regenerating some energy. Very generic, very useful to everyone, especially when you are generally a bit squishier because you're not leveling your defensive relics. For example, maybe your head is not plus 15, or maybe you don't have many defensive units that are fully stacked out in terms of plus 15 defense gear. This damage reduction definitely matters quite a bit, especially in the early game. Tackling hard content that we are not supposed to, damage reduction is very, very underrated as a stat as well. And the pair set genius of Brilliant Stars in also the same domain is very, very strong. If you look at the 4-piece set, even if you ignore the quantum damage bonus, it gives a 10% defense ignore straight up for anyone that is dealing damage to an enemy target. You don't have to even be attacking a debuff enemy, but if they do have a quantum weakness and not even having a requirement to be broken, you deal an additional 10% additional defense ignore. This is way more generic and way more easier to proc, for example, than the full effect of the Wastelander of Mandatory Desert. And that is why I really like this set. It's like a free defense ignore, and a lot of us will also be running quantum characters in our team. Maybe some of you already have Zealer, or maybe you're planning to get her, or a lot of us will have the free-to-play Tincture as well, who I'm going to be building a guide video on how to play her, and she's a very strong character as well. Farming this set, generally you'll be farming one very solid quantum DPS, which is very versatile as well in a lot of the content. And coming up, we also will be having Silver Wolf, who is one of the best characters, in my opinion, in the game so far, able to drop quantum weakness on the enemy as long as you're playing like a double quantum or maybe a mono quantum team. Very strong. And I think that rounds up the top 3 in terms of efficiency to farm. All of these other domains are really strong as well in terms of the individual sets. But I think in terms of Trailblaze energy efficiency, what we want to look for definitely is things that come together really well to give the most value for our overall account. I think the next thing that will come to mind is this relic crafting that you guys are interested in. We'll be getting tons of wastage, and which one do we actually utilize to throw our relics into? I'll be talking about this in this video. I'll link in the video card right here. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in this video right here.